Donald Trump will almost certainly be the Republican nominee in the 2020 election. Generally speaking, political parties nominate their own sitting presidents, essentially by default. But if Trump's foray into politics proves anything, it's that he is able to overcome extremely long odds.
Starting with him entering the race on the escalator, him winning a debate, him taking the lead in the polls, him winning a primary, him gaining the nomination. None more shocking, though, to me than last night when we heard the report on the air from Kristol that Secretary Hillary Clinton had called Donald Trump to concede the election.
It's unlikely that Trump will not be the 2020 candidate, but unlikely things tend to happen to Donald Trump.
I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay?
And there actually are 3 ways where you could see another candidate run as the Republican nominee in 2020. Honestly, I really don't think you should expect anyone other than Trump to be the 2020 nominee for the Republicans, but you guys asked for a video like this and my audience is my boss. So in this video, I'll explore 3 ways in which Trump could end up not being the Republican candidate as I work through my list of the 5 Republicans who are most likely to run for president in 2020. But like I've already said about 6 or 7 times, there's only one very likely answer to this question. Okay, so in case I have not made this clear enough, the number 1 most likely Republican candidate for 2020 is Donald Trump. That said, one way you'd see another candidate in 2020 would be if Trump decides to pull a poke and simply not seek a second term. There's nothing that says a president has to run for re-election, and there's plenty of reasons why Trump may opt to call it quits. Being the president, particularly for the Donald, means facing constant scrutiny and criticism in the media.
I read the different papers and then I try and watch as much as I can television. You're seeing more and more with the politics because there's so much on television.
It means constant pressure. It means not being able to legally oversee his company. And it means living in the White House, which compared to his palatial apartment high atop Trump Tower, is kind of a downgrade. It's clear that Trump enjoys his rallies, but it's pretty doubtful he likes anything else about the job. Being president is hard. His former life may be something he misses, and he could easily go back to it.
This is Shaquille O'Neal's shoe.
Oh my God.
Right here, which is a serious shoe.
Is that a real shoe?
That's a real shoe. He took it off after a game and handed it to me.
Oh my God.
I carried it like this.
He just needs to hang a mission accomplished banner on his first term and hang up his MAGA hat. I don't think this will happen, but if it did, you would have an open field for Republicans in 2020. Again, this is extremely unlikely to happen. Trump is already a declared candidate, and he has shown no signs that he's ready to back down. Another reason you might not see him run is if he's impeached, or, as is more likely, he resigns while impeachment proceedings are underway. This is also very unlikely to happen, but it is theoretically possible. It could come about if all of the following things ended up happening. First, Robert Mueller's investigation would have to uncover ironclad evidence against Trump, implicating him for either obstruction of justice or on a conspiracy charge, i.e. Russian collusion. This alone is unlikely because it would require not only that Trump committed a crime, it would also require Mueller's investigation to successfully turn up sufficient evidence to potentially prove this in a court of law. That's not easy, but that's just step 1. Next, both the House and the Senate would have to vote for impeachment. A majority vote in the House is one thing, but a 2/3 majority is also required in the Senate. Assuming every Democrat and both independents vote for impeachment, 20 of the 53 Republican senators would also have to vote for impeachment. That means around 40% of Republican senators would have to A, believe that Trump deserves to be impeached, and B, decide to vote on principle against their direct political interest. Given the current political climate, it's pretty difficult to imagine that happening. Still, it is theoretically possible, and if Trump did leave office prematurely, the most likely presidential nominee for the Republicans would be the new sitting president, which of course would be Mike Pence. As the vice president, Mike Pence would automatically be sworn in as president if Trump left or was removed from office for any reason prior to the 2020 election. This is not likely to happen, but with Trump, it's more likely than an average president.
I don't know, Putin.
I think it would be great if we got along with Russia, but I don't know Putin. She doesn't know if it's the Russians doing the hacking. Maybe there is no hacking, because they think they're trying to tarnish me with Russia. I know nothing about Russia.
No president has ever been impeached by both the House and Senate, but two relatively recent presidents have come close. Nixon resigned while impeachment hearings were underway, and Clinton was impeached by the House, but not the Senate.
Indeed, I did have a relationship with Ms. Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong.
In both these cases, impeachment hearings emerged after investigations, not totally unlike the Mueller probe. At any rate, should Trump somehow leave office midterm, Pence would become the sitting president. As sitting president, he would become the default candidate for the Republican Party. There are only two ways, again unlikely, in the event of a Trump impeachment that Mike Pence would not be the Republican candidate. First, if the Mueller investigation were able to lead to a Trump impeachment, it wouldn't be that far-fetched that Mike Pence might also be implicated. If so, he would likely face impeachment proceedings as well, and the new president would be whoever he named as VP. Or if he didn't have a chance to do so, it would be the Speaker of the House. The other threat to a Pence nomination would be the third way that Trump would end up not being the 2020 nominee: a primary challenge. Just like the other two scenarios that would stop Trump from being the 2020 nominee, this may be worth exploring, but it's extremely unlikely. Sitting presidents almost never receive serious primary challenges from their own party, but primary challenges do tend to emerge when the sitting president has a low approval rating. Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, and George H.W. Bush all faced primary challenges. Gerald Ford was challenged by Ronald Reagan, Ted Kennedy challenged Jimmy Carter, and Pat Buchanan challenged George H.W. Bush. But of course, you will notice in all three of these cases, even when challenged in the primaries, the president still won, before going on to lose in the general election. As a relatively unpopular president, Trump is likely to face a primary challenge, and then he would likely best any challenger to throw their hat into the ring. But of course, the possibility of something unprecedented happening does exist. If a primary challenger emerged and somehow managed to beat out Trump, they would become the Republican nominee in 2020. Right now, there are three people who have indicated that they might run a primary challenge against Donald Trump. The first of these is number 3 on our list, John Kasich. Kasich has been an outspoken critic of Donald Trump, and as such is a likely primary contender. When asked on Meet the Press whether he would run in 2020, Kasich responded saying, "I really don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I don't know." He was later asked about a run by George Stephanopoulos on This Week.
How seriously are you thinking about taking it on this time?
Very seriously. I'm considering it, George. These are earnest conversations that go on virtually every day with some of my friends.
That's actually pretty serious language. Here's how he responded to the same "will you run" question on Meet the Press back in 2015.
Are you running for president?
Well, I still haven't decided. That was great. I wish I could have seen it.
So last time, of course, he did run, and he seems to be leaning even more towards mounting a primary challenge this time around. So I really wouldn't be surprised if he did. Of course, I'll say it again, he would probably not be successful in challenging Trump. Presidents don't tend to lose primary challenges, and Trump already beat the guy last time. But there are a few good reasons why his potential candidacy may be taken seriously. Of course, as a governor and career politician, he would represent a return to normalcy for traditional establishment Republicans. He also tends to be seen as fairly moderate, so some would see him as a guy who could gain support from political moderates. He also has a distinct advantage as an Ohioan. Ohio is, of course, a critical swing state, and remains the best bellwether for the Electoral College. Since 1896, Ohio has only voted for the presidential loser twice. Its electoral votes have consistently gone to the winner in every election since 1964, which is the longest running bellwether accuracy streak amongst all the states. On top of that, Republicans have never in the history of the party ever won a presidential election without holding Ohio. And Kasich could easily be seen by the GOP as a way to secure the state. Another primary challenger who may emerge is number 4 on our list, Bob Corker. When asked by a Wall Street Journal reporter, Natalie Andrews, about running in 2020, his response was apparently, "I haven't ruled it out." The senator did not seek re-election in 2018, meaning he's going to have some free time on his hands beginning on January 3rd, 2019. He's also been an outspoken critic of Trump. He once said of Trump, "I think the debasement of our nation is what he'll be remembered most for."
That was great. I wish I could have seen it.
He's also on multiple occasions stopped just barely shy of calling Trump a liar. He once said of Trump that he has great difficulty with the truth. And speaking with CNN, he said this.
You said he's an untruthful president. Are you calling him? No question?
Yeah, no question. I mean, we grew up in our family not using the L word, okay? They're provable untruths.
So Corker may very well run, and as a two-term senator, he's hard to dismiss as a candidate. Of course, I wouldn't bet on him beating Trump in a primary, but there is a distinct, albeit remote, possibility that it could happen. Certainly, Corker's chances of running and winning are better than number 5 on this list, Bill Kristol. In case you don't know who this is, Kristol is the founder and editor-at-large of the political magazine The Weekly Standard. He was also chief of staff to Vice President Dan Quayle. You know, this guy.
The question is whether we're going to go forward to tomorrow or we're going to go past to the back.
I have as much experience in the Congress as Jack Kennedy did when he sought the presidency.
I believe that I've made good judgments in the past, and I think I've made good judgments in the future.
Senator, I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
And the future will be better tomorrow.
That was really uncalled for, Senator.
Well, Bobby Knight told me this. He says, there is nothing that a good defense cannot be a better offense.
You're the one that was making the comparison, Senator.
Now, the only evidence I can find that Bill Kristol is actually considering a run is an article from the Daily Caller from July of 2018, which quoted Kristol as saying, "No plans to run, but I'm randomly in Boston today and happen to have had lunch with someone who does a lot of work in New Hampshire." As he'd say, you never know. Now, Kristol has been a vocal critic of Trump, which gives the idea some credibility. I'd really be shocked if he mounted a successful challenge, but stranger things have happened. There are certainly more plausible anti-Trump names that have been floated, but most have publicly declined the possibility of their running a primary challenge against the Donald. Paul Ryan, Marco Rubio, Scott Walker, Nikki Haley, James Mattis, Rand Paul, and Steve Bannon have all endorsed Trump for 2020, as has Mike Pence, which is why I've only mentioned him as a possibility for 2020 in the case that Trump steps down from office. Other prominent Republicans who have explicitly declined to run a primary challenge include Ben Sasse, Mark Sanford, Jeff Flake, John Huntsman, Carly Fiorina, Mark Cuban, Ted Cruz, Tom Cotton, Chris Christie, Jeb Bush, Charlie Baker, Greg Abbott, Austin Peterson, Meg Whitman, and Mitt Romney. It's very unlikely that one of these politicians who have already declined to run would change their minds and run anyway. More typically, politicians plan their runs years in advance and then tease the media with non-answers to gain visibility whether they're running or not. If a politician says they're not running, they tend not to run. Still, since we're floating unlikely scenarios in this video anyhow, let's speculate about the totally oddball scenario in which one of these people who has already said no changes their minds and runs against Trump. If one of them were to do that, what do you think? Who will it be?